We are in chapter 11, section 1.1, and today we learn about the rise of the individual. Go to LODA-USD website and from Clever, launch Cengage Learning, which is our world history book. Log in your student account, and from the left side, you can navigate from Unit 5, Chapter 12, Section 1, the Italian Renaissance, and it's in page 324 or pages 324 to 325. The chapter's essential question is, how did new ways of thinking transform European culture? And the objective of this lesson is to explain how the growth of humanism, with its emphasis on the individual, led to a rebirth of arts and learning. Now, before we go straight to the details of this lesson, I would like to give an additional background to you guys about the birthplace of this what we call Renaissance. It is the city of Florence, which is located about 145 miles northwest of Rome. It lies along the Arno River and surrounded by rolling hills. Florence was founded as a Roman military colony in the 1st century BC, and by 1300s, Florence had become a wealthy city. Much of its wealth was due to its successful textile industry. Florence merchants sailed to England to get wool, and Florentine artisans wove it into fine cloth. The cloth was sold in Italy, Northern Europe, and Asia. So Florence also became a center of banking and exerted great influence throughout Europe and beyond. In 1300s, a revolution began to brew in Europe, but this revolution did involve weapons and war. This was a movement of ideas. People decided they wanted to enjoy life on earth and not just look forward to their reward in heaven. They focused on the individual and believed every person had unlimited possibilities. This was not what the church had taught in the Middle Ages. The movement was indeed revolutionary. Lesson 1.1 discusses how humanism led to advances in arts and learning. So the main idea behind humanism is, instead of blindly obeying the authority of the king or teachings of the church, the followers of this movement wanted to be independent, to think for themselves. Humanists stressed living as a Christian life, but also sought to explore new understanding of the individual in relation to God. The movement found an inspiration in the classical. If you can still remember, in history there are three major timelines: the classical, the medieval, and the modern history. So during this time, followers of the humanist philosophy found inspiration from the Greeks and the Romans with their writings and philosophies. Humanists admired what the people of those ancient times had done and said and built. So that is philosophy and art. For example, there is this Italian poet named Petrarch. He became an early humanist leader, collecting about 200 classical manuscripts. These are early forms of books. Some of these manuscripts had been hidden away in monastery libraries for centuries. People learned Greek just so they could read them. They began to forget about the accomplishments of leaders like Charlemagne and wanted to learn more about the great leaders of the ancient Greece and Rome. This new way of thinking, writing, and doing arts is called the Renaissance. Historians call the movement the Renaissance, which actually means rebirth. Take note of that. The Renaissance lasted from about 1300s to 1600s, and it began, in Italy, specifically they say in Florence, the city of Florence. And from other cities, major cities like Venice, Rome, and Milan, these Italian cities, became so wealthy from trade, ideas as well as goods, were traded in the cities, which attracted artists, writers, and scientists. These Italian cities benefited from the reopening of the ancient trade routes of the Silk Roads between Europe and China. You probably heard about this before. Interest in Asian markets had been sparked, and in part by Venetian merchant Marco Polo. He wrote about the wonders he saw as he traveled the Silk Roads from Europe to Central Asia, China, and India. Of all these Italian cities, Florence was the most popular during this time. It attracted artists like Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, Michelangelo, Donatello. That's the Ninja Turtles, right? They came to Florence hoping to make a name for themselves, and they certainly did. In this chapter, we'll learn more about the genius of Leonardo, which is in lesson 5. Raphael came to Florence to study with the great masters, of course, including Leonardo, and created his own masterpieces. Michelangelo was a painter and sculptor whose muscular subjects conveyed great intensity and power. In a way, he is like a sports photographer, Michelangelo. This artist and many others are counted among the greats of the Italian Renaissance. They were all part of this earth-shaking cultural shift that transformed Europe. Now take a look at this painting right here. It is a painting painted by Michelangelo, which is a fresco of a woman on the walls of the Sistine Chapel in Rome's Vatican museums. Now, the question is, as you look at this painting, what details make the subject seem lifelike? It may seem ordinary to you because you might be thinking, oh, this is just another painting, I can do this. But you have to understand this is groundbreaking because for the first time, after many years, centuries, artists are doing realistic paintings and artworks again. And most of the techniques that they use in creating these artworks are groundbreaking or new to this particular time or era in our history as human beings. Now, of course, let's go to the review and assess questions. The first one, reading check. What inspired the development of humanism? Number 2, identify main ideas and details. Why did the Renaissance begin in Italy? And number 3, analyze language use. What does the phrase an earth-shaking cultural shift suggest about the impact of the Renaissance in Europe? Now that question is important because the chapter's essential question is, how did new ways of thinking transform European culture? Now go ahead, go back to our Google Classroom and open the review and assess assignment. Chapter 12, Section 1, Lesson 1, and that is slide number 2. That is the second slide. Of course, you have to fill up with the basic information, last name, first name, class period, date, and the definitions of the key vocabs on the right side of the slide. What's the title of the lesson? Answer that question. And of course, your responses to the review and assess questions on the right side inside the box. Take your time, answer the questions correctly, write in complete sentences so that you will have a full credit for this assignment.